Based on the book by American author Ransom Riggs, Tim Burton brings you a children's young adult mystery horror dark fantasy fiction film about a boy discovering some magical children. Filming on this project began in February 2015 in London and the Tampa Bay area. It was premiered on September 25, 2016 in Austin, Texas. The film earned $296 million worldwide. It was created using a smaller budget of $110 million. The film did win awards, but they were nothing major, only awards given by mostly small critics. Meet the actors. Eva Green as Miss Peregrine. Asa Butterfield as Jake Portman, Ella Purnell as Emma Bloom, Samuel L. Jackson as Mr. Barron, Judi Dench as Miss Eversett, Finlay McMillan as Enoch O'Connor, Terrence Stamp as Abe Portman, Allison Janney as Dr. Golan, Rupert Everett as John Lemon, Chris O'Dowd as Franklin Portman, Lauren McCrosty as Olive Abraholos Elephanta, Kim Dickens as Marion Portman, Louis Davison as Victor, and Olan Jones as Shelley. This film best suits a fantasy-type movie because most of the features in the movie involve inhuman qualities, such as the peculiarities of the children and adults, as well as the loops and the hollows. People in an ordinary world aren't known for their ability to repeat days, nor to do things such as morph into other people, eat with the back of your head, or bring life to the inanimate. Jake goes to his grandpa Abe's house to see if he is okay. Jake finds Abe lying on the ground missing his eyeballs. Abe tells Jake to find the island from the bedtime stories that Abe used to tell him about monsters and special children. Jake then sees a monster coming towards him through the trees, but after a second glance, it's gone. 2 months later, Jake gets his father to take him to the island to prove to himself that his grandfather's stories weren't true. He finds the children's home from the stories and meets the peculiar children who live there, along with Miss Peregrine, who cares for them. These children all have their own unique abilities, and they are living in a time loop where it is September 3rd, 1943 every single day. They live in their house to hide from invisible monsters called Hollows who are hungry for their eyeballs. Jake learns that he too has a special ability. Unlike the rest of the children, he is able to see the monsters. Dr. Barron, the leader of the Hollows, discovers the location of the home and kidnaps Miss Peregrine, so the children head to London to free her. After a showdown with the Hollows, Barron is killed and the children are free. Jake goes with them and lives happily ever after. Meet the characters like Jake, the film's main protagonist. He's a socially awkward hottie with brown hair and blue eyes. Oh wait. He is 16, lonely, and seemingly crazy until meeting the Peculiars. Abe, Jake's grandpa, a wrinkly old Polish man with grey hair and the power to see monsters. He tells a young Jake tales of the island before dying as a seemingly crazy person. Miss Peregrine, the dark-haired caregiver of the children, whose age is never mentioned, and dresses in dark clothing. She is an inbreed, meaning she is very intelligent and has the ability to transform into a bird. She helps Jake along his journey of discovery, then gets captured and needs saving. Emma, a tall blonde girl with the power of air who becomes Jake's friend and basically his girlfriend, trusting him more as the film goes on. She is 16 years old, mentally and physically because of the loop, but is actually older than 70 like all the peculiar children in the home. Enoch, a boy with dark hair and the ability to control the dead, who also appears to be in his teens. He disapproves of Jake and appears jealous to him sometimes. He secretly has feelings for Olive, which he does not truly reveal until he thought she had died. Bronwyn, who has super strength. She's rather young, possibly under 10. Millard, he's invisible. Judging by his build and his high-pitched voice, he's probably under 13. Olive has fire powers. She appears to be in her teens and shows somewhat of an interest in Enoch. Claire has a mouth at the back of her head and also looks like she is probably under 10. Barron, a dark-skinned, white-haired man whose age is unknown but looks like he's in his late 50s. He became a monster in a failed experiment and won't stop eating children's eyeballs until he's back to normal. He has the peculiarity of transforming into whatever he wants. And Jake's dad experienced many locations and settings in the film. Florida, where Jake was raised and where he learned about the Peculiars and the Hollows from his grandfather. Society for Jake during his childhood in Florida wasn't enjoyable for him. He was thought of as a weird person by his classmates and commonly laughed at. When Jake is older, he talks with his grandfather one last time, moments before his death from the Hollow. Because of this last talk with Abe, he is then taken to the island in Wales to see Miss Peregrine and the children. Abe's death scene in Florida is what cranks up and begins the plot for the rest of the movie, since Jake now has a new objective in life. Before he is sent on his way, he is taken to a therapist. Dr. Golan, later revealed as Baron. Dr. Golan strongly recommends that Jake should go to this island, as she insisted it'll be good for him. Wales. The entire time spent in Wales is on an island. Here, he learns even more about the Hollows, and also finds out a peculiarity of his own, as well as how a time loop works. In this part of the film, most of the main characters are also introduced, and most of the screen time is spent in Wales. Jake's time in Wales proved to him that his grandfather wasn't actually crazy, and that his stories he told were in fact true. Society here was a bit different. Miss Peregrine and the children were usually nice to Jake, and Jake seemed to fit in well with them since he already knew much about them. Also in Wales, out of the time loop, everybody is pretty casual, and some could even be considered a bit weird, like the two teens who were showing Jake the correct way to the children's home. Jake also discovers that Dr. Golan was actually Mr. Baron, and that he was using him to find the time loop. This led to Baron taking Miss Peregrine in exchange for temporarily promising the lives of the children. From this scene, Jake knew he was the one who had to guide the children. While still in Wales, Jake managed to kill one of the Hollows and save the children. Unfortunately, Miss Everset did not survive. Jake now takes the children to another time loop in Blackpool and establishes a plan to stop Baron and free the other Embreens. The children had to leave urgently, as without Miss Peregrine or Miss Everset around to reset the day, the bomb that dropped every night would not be reversed. Blackpool. Jake and the children go to Blackpool in an attempt to save Miss Peregrine and to stop Mr. Baron and his friends. In this location, they manage to free Miss Peregrine and kill all the Hollows, as well as Mr. Baron's friends. This time here is in the present, creating a whole new experience for the children. Society is similar to an everyday community. The film ends with a time loop, taking Jake back to Florida, with his grandfather being alive this time. He then reunites with the children on a boat where the film finishes. Experience relationships like Jake and his father, who are not too close to each other. He always told Jake the opposite to what his grandfather would tell him, and they didn't talk as much as Jake talked to Abe. Jake and Abe. Jake was closest to his grandfather Abe the most by far. When Jake was young, Abe would always tell Jake stories about Miss Peregrine and the children. Jake found great interest in it and got very close to his grandfather. This was especially proven when he went through a phase of anxiety and depression when Abe was killed by the Hollows Jake was told about in the bedtime stories. Jake and Emma. Jake and Emma became closer and closer together as the film carried out. At first, Emma was hesitant to get to know Jake better because she was concerned about previous experiences with other people. But as the film went on, the two became closer together and eventually began a proper relationship. Miss Peregrine and the children. The children were close to Miss Peregrine, mainly because she was basically their mother. All of the children and Peregrine acted as a family. In the film, Miss Peregrine would have the children do their daily jobs, let them play around, and at the end of each day, would eat dinner at the table together and watch a film before their bedtime. The narrative structure. The film follows a 3-act narrative structure, with Act 1 introducing the characters and plot, Act 2 expanding on that, and Act 3 giving us the final confrontation. In the first act, we are introduced to Jake. We see his grandfather die, we see the bedtime stories about the island, and we see Jake go to the island where the Peculiars are introduced. In the second act, we learn more about the Peculiars, we learn about the villain Mr. Baron, and we see Jake learn more about himself, his peculiarity, and his role in the film. In the third act, we see Jake and the Peculiars facing off against Baron. We see Baron lose in the final confrontation, and we see Jake overcome his character arc. Watch Jake as he develops over the movie. When the film starts off, the director shows us what life is like for Jake and also sheds some light of what Jake thinks of himself. He has no friends and is considered crazy because of his partial belief in the bedtime stories he heard as a child. He is antisocial and mostly lonely. This was what Jake's life was like until his grandfather died. Just before Abe died, Jake was told to go to the island, the one that he was told about in his bedtime story, so that he could meet Miss Peregrine and the children. This is where Jake's character development began. By the end of the film, we see a changed Jake. Now that he knows he is the only one who can see the hollows, he realizes how unique he really is and how significant he is to defeating Baron and his monsters. He is no longer depressed or lonely because of his new friends who he fits in with. We see him take the role of leader as they head into battle against the hollows, and he tells them all what to do to help. Like him, they are peculiars, and that's why he feels he belongs with them. When Jake went to the island and met the peculiars, he realized that all of the bedtime stories his grandfather had told him were true, and that he wasn't out of his mind like he had originally thought. When he and Emma watched Miss Peregrine kill a hollow, they realized that unlike the other peculiars in the house, Jake could see the hollows. This meant that not only was he also a peculiar, and he had finally found somewhere that he belonged, but that he could also play a significant role to help defeat the hollows. These events are what helped him to develop. Jake's character development throughout the film shows several ideas in the film and also the director's purpose. After all the events in the film, the main idea that Jake realized was that although he may still be considered unordinary for his peculiarities, he wasn't alone. He realized there are people out there that were struggling just like he was. The director wanted to show that through our differences we can still achieve something great. Although Jake, the children and the inbreeds could be considered unwanted for their destructive possibilities, they managed to achieve something good. They managed to prevent Baron and his friends from performing their attempts to become immortal. Experience the themes like everyone is unique. This message is showing through Jake, who is awkward, apparently crazy, and thinks there is nothing special about him at the beginning, but grows to learn that he is important and can save other people with his newfound friends and powers. Tim Burton could be directing this theme towards teenagers like Jake, or anyone watching this presentation who thinks they aren't unique. Strength can be shown in any form. Another idea the director likely wanted to show was that strength can be shown in any form. The peculiar children were thrown out of society because they were different from everyone else. Eventually, the children were the ones who ended up saving what potentially could have been Baron and his friends' total reign over the earth, since their mission was to become immortal. The least expected of people were the ones who ended up saving the day. Children who were isolated out of society. Jake knew that the children were capable of doing good things. The battle between Jake and the children against Baron and his friends can be considered similar to David and Goliath. Baron and his group are known for killing many people of the children's kind and are close to becoming immortals, whereas Jake and the children are more like David, unexpected to win. After much death, the cunningness of Jake and the children eventually lead them to take the win over Baron and save the inbreeds. In Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Directed by Tim Burton and Jane Goldman. A presentation by AJ and Jaden.